بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Today's topic is a topic which is right, like they say, right up my alley in my profession. The first topic, not the second one. So we have two topics. One is being a judge, and the second is taking bribes. And the major sins being associated with that is being an unjust or al-Qadi as-Su', being a dishonest, being an unjust judge, and giving bribes or taking bribes to the authorities. Now, judgeship, al-Qada, is one of the highest position in Islam. Some scholars actually regard it as the second highest position after the Khalifa. And the reason that only a Khalifa, or the reason is it is one level below the Khalifa, is because the Khalifa is the only person that can overrule or overturn the verdict of a Qadi. Now, the office of judiciary, it went through many phases and many changes throughout the period of Islam, throughout the history of Islam. And these changes or evolutions, why did they take place? They took place in order to keep the judiciary and the judges in check and ensure that the underlying principle, the underlying pillar, the underlying principle is kept intact. They went through many changes in order to ensure that justice, which is the pillar of the judiciary system, it is kept intact. Now, why is justice so important, and why is being a dishonest judge one of the major sins of Islam? It's for obvious reasons. If a judge, he rules dishonestly, then you can imagine the amount of corruption that can spread in the land. Now, what kind of corruption are we talking about? We're talking about every and any type of corruption. Even the scholars, they mention that if you see an increase in price, inflation, if you see corruption amongst individuals, if you see homelessness, if you see these types of things, then it can be attributed to the divine punishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inflicts because of the corruption of the ruler and the judge. These things, homelessness and inflation and increase in prices and everything being expensive, if you witness that or see that in a particular land, then you know that this is divinely attributed, or this is attributed to the fact that there is corruption at the level of the judiciary and or at the level of those of the rulers. One of the scholars, and we have mentioned his name many times, Wahab ibn Munabbih, he said that when a judge or a ruler, he intends injustice or he acts unjustly, Allah will bring about its effect on the people in the country. When he intends good, when he intends justice, Allah will bring blessing to the people of that country. One of the governors of Hims, he wrote to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Now I want you to pay attention to what he said, but more than that, pay attention to what Umar ibn Abdul Aziz said, because he was the Khalifa. So the governor of Hims, he wrote to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and he said, the city of Hims is ruined and it needs rebuilding. The roads, the buildings, the whole infrastructure, it needs rebuilding. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu, he just wrote down a couple sentences. And that was it. I was really, subhanAllah, it took me 1 hour just to search for this one example. Because of the amount of wisdom that it has in it. He said, حَصِّنْهَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَنَقِّ طُرُقَهَا مِنَ الظُّلْمِ وَالسَّلَامِ. That's it. He says, fortify your city. You know, every city has forts. It has defense mechanism in order for it not to be ruined and destroyed. So he said, fortify it with justice and clear the roads of injustice. Assalamu alaikum. That's all he said. If you fortify your cities with justice and you remove injustice in whether it's in the markets or amongst the police, whatever it is, you remove it, the city is going to be rebuilt by itself. The city is going to start prospering by itself. The scholars, in fact, they wrote many books. Not one book or two books. They wrote several books on the ethos, on the qualification and the strict guidelines for a judge in order that justice is maintained. For example, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu, he actually said that it is haram for a qadi to judge when he is angry. Let's say, for example, he's in his house, he got into a fight, an argument with his wife, and then now he's coming to his court to be a judge. He says it's haram for him to judge. How do you think he's going to? How do you think he is going to rule? Very irrationally, which means unjustly. In fact, some of the other scholars, they said that a qadi, he must not judge while he is hungry, while he is thirsty, while he needs to go and answer the call of nature. How do you think he is going to judge when he's hungry? There's two disputants that come to him, and one says this, another says this. How do you think he wants to judge? Do you think he's going to take his time? Do you think he's going to go ahead and really question the both of them? He is going to hurry up in his judgment, which may most definitely, most likely lead to an injustice and irrational decision. And the office of a judge was such a big responsibility that many Sahaba, many scholars actually refused to serve in it. They were even imprisoned. They were even beaten because they refused to serve as judges. And we have even the Prophet ﷺ, he is giving this nasiha to one of his companions, his beloved companion, Abu Dharr radiyallahu anhu. He says, Ya Abu Dharr, inni araka da'ifa, wa inni uhibbu laka ma uhibbu li nafsi. Subhanallah. He said, Oh Abu Dharr, I see you weak. He said, and I love for you what I love for myself. Meaning, I want for you what I want for myself. So what is it that the Prophet ﷺ wants for him that he also wants for himself? He says, do not rule over two persons. Don't make a judgment over two persons. Don't be an amir. Don't be a leader over two persons. And do not manage an orphan's property. And this hadith is in Sahih Muslim. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he was also offered the office of being the supreme judge, or nowadays it's called the chief judge. But he refused. And they kept on telling him, and he refused until he was imprisoned for refusing the order of the Khalifa. Also, other scholars besides Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, one of the scholars was Muḥammad ibn Wasi'. He was commissioned to go ahead and become a judge of Basra, which is in Iraq, but he refused. So the governor, Malik ibn al-Mundhir, he said to him, either you take the position or I will whip you. He said, if you do that, then you are the ruler. It is better for me to be disgraced in this dunya than for me to be disgraced in the hereafter. Why disgraced in the hereafter? What if I were to go ahead and unjustly or make a decision that is wrong? Allah, He is going to disgrace me in the hereafter. So better that you go ahead and whip me and make me disgraced in this dunya than for me to be disgraced in the next. And also Muhammad ibn Wasi', he says that the first people to be summoned, first people to be called to question on the Day of Judgment are the judges. They are the first people to be judged on the Day of Judgment. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he wrote a letter to Makhul, a scholar, and he wanted him to be a judge. So he politely declined. He said, why are you declining to be a judge? He says, because this is for the ashraf, these are for the noble people, meaning freed individual people who are well known. He said, I'm a freed slave. Now in Islam, it doesn't really matter if you are a former slave or if you have always been free. But he wanted to get away from the position of being a judge by saying, I'm a freed slave. Why? Because a slave cannot become a judge. So as if he is saying, I'm a slave. I'm not from, but he is saying it in a very indirect way. And then he said, if I was given a choice to be a qadi, to be a judge, and having my head chopped off, I would rather choose my head being chopped off. I rather choose my head being chopped off than for me to go ahead and to accept the office of the judiciary. Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, he said that when the judge, he goes to work, he says one day he should go to work to judge, another day he should take off to weep for himself, to make repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're talking about what kind of judges here so far? We're talking about good judges. We're talking about judges who are actually just and righteous and honest. He said, still, this individual, he should spend one day in judgment and one day weeping for himself. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith narrated by Sunan al-Tirmidhi and Sunan Abi Dawud, he says, "Man waliya al-qada'a faqad dhubiha bighayri sikkin." The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever accepts or whoever is appointed as a judge, then it is as if he has been slaughtered without a knife. How do you think being slaughtered without a knife feels like? A knife, what does a knife do? It cuts. If it's a sharp knife, it will go ahead and cut very quickly. But a person who accepts the appointment of being a judge, then he is actually being slaughtered without a knife, meaning that his agony, his torment is going to be as if there's an individual who is being slaughtered, for example, with this. Is it possible? Yeah, if you go ahead and try to put it on the person's throat long enough and fast enough, right? Maybe it will take you 1,000 tries, 10,000 tries. The person will go ahead and feel pain, but he will eventually get slaughtered. He will eventually die. A judge, a person who accepts the office of the judgeship, it is as if he is being slaughtered without a knife. And we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He said that a just judge, he will be brought on a day of judgment and experience such a harsh reckoning that he said that a just judge will be brought on a day of judgment and experience such a harsh reckoning the just judge would face a great trial that he wishes if he was not appointed a judge between people, even in the division of palm dates. Meaning that he will go through such a hard time in his reckoning, and he's a just judge, but he will go through such an account, such an audit, that this person, he would wish he wasn't even a judge between the date palm trees, or something very minor, that he was not appointed as a judge. Imagine things that has to do with blood, that has to do with the wealth of the people, that has to do with their families even more. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told us what happens when a person, he is actually seeking a position of authority. It is narrated in Sunan al-Tirmidhi by Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man ibtagha al-qada'a wa sa'ala fihi shufa'a wukila ila nafsihi wa man ukriha alayhi anzala Allahu alayhi malakan yusaddidhu." That whoever seeks to be a judge and asks others to intercede so he can have it, so he can be made a judge, so he goes through different connections that he has. Whoever seeks it for himself, Allah is going to leave him alone. Meaning, he's going to figure out how to do certain things. He needs to figure a way out for himself. But whoever is forced into it, meaning whoever is made to be in a position of a judge, then Allah will send down an angel to help him, to guide him. Which means what? Never seek a position of authority. Because if you go ahead and seek a position of authority like a judge, you're going to be left alone. But if people are the ones who put you in that position, Allah, He is going to send the angels to go ahead and guide you and direct you. Also the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever seeks to be a judge, and this hadith is in Sunan Abi Dawud, that من طلب قضاء المسلمين حتى يناله ثم غلب عدله جوره فله الجنة ومن غلب جوره عدله فله النار. That whoever seeks to be a judge over the Muslims, such that he acquires it, and his justice outweighs his tyranny, his injustice, then he's going to be in Jannah. So if his justice outweighs his tyranny, he's going to be in Jannah. But if his tyranny, his injustice, his dhulm is going to outweigh his justice, then he will be in the hellfire. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he divided judges into 3 different categories. All of the judges, they fall under one of these 3 categories. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, and this hadith is in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, he said, Al-Qudaa thalathatun, Qadiyani fil nari wa qadin fil jannah. He said, judges, there are 3 types. There's 3 types of judges. 2 of these types of judges are in the hellfire. Only 1 are in Jannah. So if you do the ratio, that means 1/3 of the judges, 1/3 of the judges are going to be in the Jannah. 2/3, 67% are going to be in the hellfire. Because of how sensitive this position is and how serious this position is in front of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, who are these people? A man who judges without the truth while he knows it. He knows the truth, but he judges without it. He knows this person is innocent. He finds him guilty. He knows this person is guilty. He finds him innocent, and vice versa. He knows that this is not how it should be. And we have hundreds of cases like this. We have hundreds of cases where a judge will go ahead because he is bribed or because of the fear of his life. He will go ahead and do an injustice to someone else, to one of the disputants. In fact, even in the field that I am in, which is what? It's family law. It's family law. You might say, well, there's really not so much injustice that can happen. You will be surprised. I had a case just about a week ago in which a wife was saying that this was a sister, an Arab sister, who was married to a Pakistani brother. She lived in one country of Europe and he lived in a different country of Europe. And so they had, some problems. Every time they had an argument, she would fly back to her country. Every time they had a problem, she would fly back to their country. Finally, the husband became fed up. He said, what is this? Every time you leave the marital home, every husband and wife, they have an argument. So he refused to call her. In the beginning days, he used to say, come back, please, it's okay, don't worry. So she would come back. Imagine going from one country to another country, not one city. So after a while, she did this so many times, the husband refused to call. So she applied for a khula. She applied for a khula with some unknown people, but she doesn't know them. She doesn't know that they are untrustworthy. They took her money, called the husband. Husband says, who are you guys? I don't know you guys. Who are the people who is going to be sitting on my case? They didn't even respond back to him. They sent him another letter. He is keep on responding back to the letter, and they are not replying back to him. And so they took her money, and within a month or so, they divorced husband and wife. Where do you think there's an injustice here? There's an injustice on both of them. That you have broken the sacredness of the sanctity of marriage. You have went and took her money and oppressed the husband. And the husband was smart enough and was smart enough and informed enough. He told his wife, these people, we don't know them. By the way, I'm still claiming you as my wife. But that is because he was smart enough and knowledgeable enough to go ahead and say that. Because there are other people who genuinely will go ahead and believe, no, she's not my wife anymore. I was forced to divorce her. And so what happens? She goes and she marries someone else while she's actually in reality Islamically married still to that individual. What do you think she is doing? Committing haram without her knowing it. And the husband, miskin, he has no way of recourses, and so many of them, they come to our council in order for us to check the validity and if there's something that we can do about it. So here the Prophet ﷺ, he's saying there's three types of judges. Two are in the hellfire, one is in Jannah. Who are the two people in the hellfire? He said one is the person who knows the truth, yet he does not rule by it. And the other is a judge who has no knowledge and he still violates the rights of people. He is in Jahannam. So this is an ignorant judge. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know the correct procedure. He doesn't know the sanctity, in this case, the sanctity of marriage. He's an ignorant, majhul, unknown individual. There is no established procedure. He just goes and gives out dissolution of marriages as a person would give out candies to little boys and girls. And the third is a judge who judges with the truth, and he's knowledgeable about it. So he has knowledge and he judges with the truth. Whereas the second person was what? He has no knowledge. And there's another narration that says, even if he gets it right, even if he's correct, he's still in the hellfire. Why? Because he is ignorant. Even if he got it right, he is still in the hellfire. Just like nowadays, even if a person, let's say a doctor, or a nurse, she writes a prescription, even if she got it right, she will still go to prison for writing it without an authority. Because when you say a doctor, that means he has a certain authority and he has that knowledge. And if he gets it wrong, what happens to a doctor? If he gets it wrong, if he makes a mistake, that's why you have insurances and they will go ahead and cover it. And depending on the severity of his mistake, most likely he's not going to lose his license, because every single doctor, there's malpractice. And that's why there is insurances and there's laws protecting doctors, unless there is very negligence. It is out of negligence. Anyway, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that even if that individual, a judge who judges with the truth, then this third person, he is in Al-Jannah. Now, what is the criteria used to? We've been talking about justice. So, what is the definition of justice? How do we know that a judge he passed a judgment based upon the justice? And that is that in order for a judge to be just, he must rule by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the Sharia. This is justice, even if the people think that this is injustice. Because what is our definition of justice and what is the definition of justice in Allah? It is sometimes or most of the times different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَلَا تَشْتَرِي بِآيَاتِي ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And do not exchange my verses. And these verses that I am about to recite, it is a clear warning against anyone, whether it's a judge or whether it's a ruler, against doing injustice. And how do you do injustice? When you do not rule or pass a judgment by the laws of Allah. So Allah, He says, do not exchange my verses for a small price, and whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then it is those who are the kafirun, the disbelievers. And also in the following verse, Allah, He says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And this verse is chapter 5, verse 45. Chapter 5, verse 45, in which Allah, He mentions a life for a life, أَنَّ النَّفْسَ بِالنَّفْسِ وَالْعَيْنَ بِالْعَيْنِ وَالْأَنْفَ بِالْأَنْفِ. And then He says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then indeed they are the zalimun. They are the people who are unjust. They are the wrongdoers. And then He says in the following verse 47, وَلْيَحْكُمْ أَهْلُ الْإِنْجِيلِ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. That whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then indeed these people are fasiqun. They are they are openly or defiantly disobedient. And then in the following verse, these are all in Surah Al-Ma'idah chapter 5. Allah, He says, وَأَنِحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ وَحَذَرْهُمْ أَن يَفْتِنُوكَ عَنْ بَعْضِ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُصِيبَهُم بِبَعْضِ ذُنُوبِهِمْ وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ لَفَاسِقُونَ. So He's telling the Prophet ﷺ, and judge, O Muhammad, between them by what Allah has revealed. So even Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ to judge by what Allah has revealed, and do not follow their inclinations and beware of them. Don't lean towards them. Judge by what Allah has revealed to you. And then He's telling all of us, أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Is it the hukm, the judgment of ignorance, of jahiliyyah, of the kuffar? Is that what you are always seeking? And this is unfortunate here in our times, in our days, where a person, if he sees his dunyawi benefit with the secular courts, he will go to the secular courts. Whether it's a man or a woman or two business partners. No, it's better for me to go to the secular courts because I know the judge, or I know a lawyer who can go ahead and do these. Use different tactics, different things. Even he knows that he is at fault or he doesn't deserve that. People nowadays, this is what they do. A wife will go to the secular courts in order to take what does not belong to her. She will take 50% or more of the house, 50% or more of the husband's wealth, and that does not belong to her, because once you are divorced, his wealth does not belong to you. The house that he bought with his own money does not belong to you. So this concept of my money is my money and his money is my money, this is un-Islamic concept. Your money is your money, his money is his money. And he is obligated to spend on you as long as you are married. And so you will find people that will go, and there was, recently someone, she called the police she went and applied for a divorce. She applied for a divorce, and then she called the police on the husband of violence, domestic violence. Why? To kick him out of the house. And there's no violence, there's nothing. This is a tactic. They know that the laws are in favor of the woman at the expense of the men. And people will say, but we know there has been injustice that has been committed in our country against these poor women. Okay, I agree. There was and there continues to be injustice in our Muslim countries against women, but does that mean that now they commit injustice against men in this country? So what's the solution? The solution is, the problem is because those people never applied Sharia in the first place. So the solution is not to apply secular laws, the solution is to apply the Sharia in these kinds of cases. So Allah, He's telling us, أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Do you want the laws of the kuffar to be applied to you? Is that what you really want? There was one case that I had, and I had to make they appointed me as the arbitrator, and they said, with regards to, they had a child. The woman wanted to go ahead and get remarried. And now we know the Sharia, what is the ruling of the Sharia? That if a woman gets divorced and she has a child, then the Sharia says, the Prophet ﷺ said that the child belongs to the mom. Okay, why? Because that is where the maslahah is. That is where the well-being of that child is, with the mother. The mother, she has an attachment, she can breastfeed him. She can go ahead and give him that motherly love, which the father cannot. And plus the father is always away. Who do you think the father is going to leave the child to? To a woman. So better his ex-wife than any other woman, because the mother of that child knows best. And of course, upon him is the maintenance of that child, whether it is education or food or whatever it is. But the condition is as long as the mother does not get remarried. Why? Because justice requires that any man, when he marries another woman with a child, he is not going to do justice to that child. This is an animalistic characteristic. Every animal has it, including lions, including us humans, men. This is a fact we cannot deny. The fact that a person who is interested in marrying the wife, and the wife will try, or the woman, and she tries to take precaution and say, will you accept my daughter or my son? Every man is going to say, yes, I accept it. But innately, he's not going to accept it. He will say whatever it takes to go ahead and convince her. Even when you see one lion, he's taking over another group of lions, the pride. What does he do? The first thing he does after killing the alpha male, first thing he does is kill all of the kids. This is what it is. This is, see, in the animals, Allah, He put that in them, and they carry it because they're animals. Allah, He puts this in us, but we're not animals, so we don't go ahead and kill. Right? We don't do that. Because we're humans, but we have it in us. No one can deny it. So the Sharia says, مَا لَمْ تَتَزَوَّجِي. The Prophet ﷺ told this one woman, as long as you don't get married. You get married, where does the child go to? The father. Now you might say, if a father gets married, then isn't injustice going to be done to her by his wife? Yes, but it is less of a degree than if a man was to do it. Is that understood? So I said, okay, come back after 1 month. I gave them 1 month. Go back home, talk about it. Because when you do qada and whatever, you're going to displease one person. So what is the best thing to do? Don't do qada. Ruddul khusuma. The Prophet Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, Ruddul khusuma hatta yastalihu. Basically, he says, don't take any cases unless they seek mediation, arbitration. Why? Because فَإِنَّ مَجْلِسَ الْقَضَاء, he said, because the majlis, or the hearing of the judiciary hearing, the adjudication process, is something that's going to bring animosity amongst the two disputants. Better, I don't get involved, no one gets involved. I said, you have 1 month. Go ahead, make sulh amongst yourselves, see how you guys want to do it, come up with a schedule where whatever they agree. Now, if the father willingly gives up, then that is his choice. That is his choice. If he says, no, you can keep the daughter and go ahead and get, or the son and go ahead and get remarried, then that is his choice, he's giving up. Anyway, long story. I'm talking, then the second majlis, okay, what did you guys? He said, we leave it to you. So I said, brother, whatever decision I make, will you follow it? By Allah, he says, I will follow it, whatever you say. I said, sister, will you follow it? Whatever decision I make. Say yes. I said, because this is important, because this is where the maslahah of your child, and this is the sharia of Allah. So I said, sister, you can go ahead and get remarried, and you can do whatever, live a new life and begin a new life. And I gave her this preparatory talk. I said, but your daughter, who is over the age of bulugh, must go to your ex-husband, must go to her father. And she picked up her things, and he says, I'll see you in court. She told the ex-husband, I will see you in court. What does that mean? Forget about this sharia you guys are talking about. I know where my maslahah is. I know where my success is. I want to keep my daughter. So I said, sister, you can go ahead and do whatever you want. I'll tell you, she only has maybe about 4 years left in which she's going to be over the age of 18. After that, you really don't have any control. And the justice of Allah is, if any of the parent, they do an injustice on the other parent by using the children as a weapon, Allah will make sure that He puts their hatred in their hearts. I've seen it with my own eyes. Just on Friday, this last Friday, I had a case. Yesterday, I had a case. One sister, she applied for a khula. Well, a long story. The husband, so she took away all of the kids. She has 4 kids. She took away all of the kids from the husband. They're unable to see the kids since 2019 or 2018. How many years is that? 4 or 5 years? Unable to see the kids. You know those kids, some of them are I think, as young as 5 or 6 and as old as 17. So you could see. Wallahi, she said, all of my kids hate me. Wallahi, she said that. She said, on my son's phone, he has registered, wallahi, it made me want to cry. She said, on my son's phone, my phone was registered as MF, F word, and then the B word, and then mom. Her son, she said, I saw it with my own eyes. She's telling me. Why? We don't know the full, we don't know why, 100%, but what she said, from her own admission, I don't need to hear the other side because this is from her own admission, she's doing the shahada against herself. She's saying, they're all blaming me for separating them from the father. This is the justice of Allah. Some of them are more successful than others, meaning that maybe they will go ahead and put poison in there and block all kinds of communication, say your father is this, that, and they will believe it and believe it and believe it until the truth comes out after 50 years. That both of them are dead. In the grave, the truth eventually comes out from the tongue of some far-off relative who says the truth even after half a century. And guess who they are going to be making dua for and against? This is injustice. So the Prophet ﷺ, he is, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's saying, أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Do you want the hukm, the verdict, the laws of the kuffar? Is that what you want? My maslahah, another case, I just remembered. The person, he's a millionaire. He has several houses and several apartment condominiums. The wife, she applied for a divorce. What? I think because he married a second wife. Is it haram to marry a second wife? Is it injustice against the first wife to marry a second wife? Why are you guys hesitant? Say no. Brothers, no one can see you. No, the camera can only see me. Astaghfirullah, Ibrahim, you don't need the permission of the first wife. Okay, it's okay, I forgive you. Yeah. You get the first one, okay? For the first one, you need the permission of your parents. So you don't need the permission of your first wife. Is this injustice? According to our standards, it's injustice. But according to Sharia, according to Allah, He would not have legislated anything that is injustice. So He married her for whatever reason. Maybe He wants to have more fun, whatever. It doesn't matter. But as long as now He is going to be just. And so she applied for a divorce. She accused him of all kinds of things. She took away all of her kids, the money and everything, and this person really suffered. He lost his job because it blew up. And the employers found out there was a huge scandal that was attached to it too. And this person's good name was his name, just give me this one. His name was tarnished. While you fix this one. Okay, give me the mic stand. His name was tarnished. And subhanallah, after repenting to Allah, or after turning towards Allah and making dua and everything, wallahi, this individual, I know him personally. I know him personally. And I have been following his case from day one. And this person, Allah has returned back all of his wealth plus 10 times more. And wallahi, all of his kids came back to him. And wallahi, they love him and they hate the mother because of what she did. This is the justice of Allah. Because when the truth came out, then the truth came out. Don't ever seek, however enticing it is, because it is only poison that is covered in sweetness. The so-called justice of man-made laws. And inshallah, one day I will have a lecture just on man-made laws. Even the Prophet even Allah, He told Dawud alayhi salam in the Quran, in Surah As-Sad, chapter 38, verse 26, Ya Dawud, Inna ja'alnaka fil ardi khalifa. He was a khalifa and also a judge. فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. He said, and judge the people on truth, otherwise you are, and follow not your desires, because you are going to be misled or go astray from the path of Allah. Allah, He's telling a prophet, don't do that, otherwise you are going to go astray. Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he said that Allah, He is in fact issuing a stern warning to anyone in the position of power and authority. Anyone. Who is a judge? We said a judge is a khalifa or someone right under him. It can also be anyone who is making a decision between two people. You're also a judge. A father who is making a judgment between two of his kids. Two of his kids come, one is his favorite and the other is not so favorite. The one who is not so much of his favorite, he goes and he hits the favorite kid, son or daughter. What happens? The father, he is going to render justice. What kind of justice? Harsh justice. After a week, now the favorite son, he hits or does something or takes something away from the other child who's not so much of his favorite. You think he's going to do the same thing? That is injustice. You will be asked by Allah on the Day of Judgment, why did you do that? You were for them you were a judge. And you did not judge according to how the Prophet ﷺ, which is the Sharia, he says, and treat all of them equally. You gave the favorite one $10, $100 for Eid. The other not so favorite because no one was looking, you gave them less. Or you give your daughters less than your sons because you are someone who likes sons. But Allah has tested you with daughters as well. This is a test. Or you never eat with your daughters. You only eat with your sons. Whatever it is. Whatever it is. Or the mother preferring the son over the daughters. No. You can't do that. You are now in the position of being a judge between your own kids. So imagine which category of the three judges you're going to fall under. The Prophet ﷺ, he also says in the hadith, لا يقبل الله صلاة إمام يحكم بغير ما أنزل الله. That Allah does not accept the prayer of a judge who judges with what Allah has not revealed, or he judges by other than what Allah has revealed. Now, if you make a mistake, a human mistake, don't worry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He forgives those types of people who make a human mistake. But they still have knowledge and they are dispensing justice, but they made a mistake. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا حَكَمَ الْحَاكِمُ فَأَصَابَ فَلَهُ أَجْرًا وَإِذَا أَخْطَأَ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ. That if a hakim, if a ruler, if a judge, he makes a decision, he passes a judgment, and he gets it right, he will have 2 rewards. And if he gets it wrong, he will have 1 reward. In fact, even the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to also say something about himself when he was acting in the capacity of a judge. The Prophet ﷺ, he had many hats on, many positions. Number 1, he was the Prophet of Allah. He was the ruler as well. So he was acting in the capacity as a ruler or as a statesman, as the head of the country. He was also acting as a judge. He was also acting as a military commander. He was also acting as a husband, as a son-in-law, as a many different capacity, as a father. And he would judge as such between his wives. So here, he wanted to make a disclaimer because he heard some people disputing near his house. So he came out and he said, I'm only a human being. He says, 2 of you, 2 opponents, you come to me for judgment, and perhaps some of you are more articulate than others. You know, some people, they're very sweet-tongued or very fast-tongued, or they know how to use the arguments in a very nice way, and they're able to convince you. The other miskin, he doesn't know that. He's not very eloquent in speech, but he's very eloquent in his sadaqah, in his sincerity towards Allah. And what really counts is, you know, subhanAllah, one in the book, and this all, I remember this, a book by Stephen Covey in the art or the 7 habits of highly successful people. He writes in there, he says, a lot of us, we are actually concentrating on very artificial things, on human traits, like you should go ahead and be a smart talker, you should be a fast talker, you should be a good salesman, you should be eloquent in speech. He said, but we are not fixing ourselves, and this is the #1 best-selling non-fiction book ever. You should all buy it. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Every one of you should buy it. So he said, the CEOs, the countries, the education system, even the parents, what are they concentrating? Hey, you should be eloquent in speech. Nowadays, a speaker, how is he chosen? By his eloquency, by how fast, how good he's able to talk. A successful car dealer, how does he sell his cars? By convincing you because of very slick words and certain words that he uses to convince you. He says what people don't know is that the sincerity, and he's a non-Muslim. He said the sincerity of the heart speaks more eloquently than any tongue can. Subhanallah. Because he's a Christian, practicing Christian. So a lot of the things he says has religious overtones, which is actually very much in line with Islam. I wanted to go ahead and really take that book. I've written a 17-page summary of just chapter 1. And I wanted to go ahead and actually write it from an Islamic paradigm, bring all of the hadith that he is speaking and support it. Subhanallah. So here, the Prophet ﷺ, he's saying that some of you are more articulate, you are more eloquent than the others. So then I consider him to be truthful. I consider that person that maybe he's right. So I give him, I judge in his favor. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, so if I mistakenly give to that person, don't take it, because you're only taking a piece of the hellfire. Don't take it. Because even the Prophet ﷺ acknowledged he may make a mistake as a human, not a prophet of Allah, as a human. And why? Because of the eloquence of certain people. And the last, the second major sin that is also very much connected, and this is sin number 27. The first one was 26, and that is taking bribes. And this is, I'll finish this off very quickly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran very clearly, chapter 2, verse 188, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ. Do not eat or do not consume your property wrongfully, nor use it to bribe the judges. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly prohibited this in the Quran. And of course, when He says hukam, He doesn't only mean judges, He means rulers, He means anyone who's in a position of authority. In fact, look at what the Prophet ﷺ, he said. And this hadith is in Sunan Abi Dawud. Whoever intercedes for his brother, let's say Ibrahim, he needs something, and I intercede for him. Maybe he needs a job, I go and I intercede for him, I write him a letter of recommendation. And then he gives me a gift. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever intercedes for his brother, and he is given a gift for it, and he accepts it, he has come to a great door amongst the doors of riba. So if he gives me a gift because of the intercession that I made for him, and I take it from him, this is the greatest doors from amongst the doors of riba, which means that this is also a type of bribery that he is giving to me. And the Prophet ﷺ, he cursed those who gives bribery and those who accepts it. He said, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ الرَّاشِي وَالْمُرْتَشِي فِي الْحُكْمِ. That Allah has cursed the one who offers a bribe and the one who accepts a bribe to receive a favorable judgment. So you go to a judge and you say, oh dear judge, it is sunnah to accept gifts, tahadu, tahabu, and you will go ahead and use the hadith that, you should go ahead and accept my gift to you. This is haram. A judge cannot accept. In fact, you know what they said? A judge cannot intermingle with the commoners. Come pray salah, leave home. He shouldn't even buy from the souk, because what if someone gives him a lower price and he remembers that, and then one day he becomes his disputant? How is he going to feel? That's why Ali radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, all of the khulafa that came, they gave a very high stipend, salary for the judges, so that way they can live a comfortable life and they're not in need. They're not in need of any money from the people or any types of discounts. Now, if I give a bribe to a police officer, Allah has cursed me. And if he accepts the bribe, this is haram as well. Now, what happens? Because when you give I was pulled over in one Muslim country. I didn't have my license. I drove in that country for a long time without a license. I'm at fault. And I was driving, and I didn't have my seatbelt either. So the police pulls me over. He's on his motorcycle. He said, go. I pulled over. He says, what? And I immediately put my seatbelt on. He says, you didn't have your seatbelt on. I said, yes, you're right. I didn't have my seatbelt on. He said, do you know how much it is? The ticket? He said, he gave me a high number. And let's say he's telling the truth. It's 300. I said, I'm sorry. He said, it's 300. I said, okay, give me the ticket. Because I know why he's mentioning it's $300. He said, you want ticket? I said, yes. He said, it's 300. I said, yes, give me. And then he keeps on mentioning this, thinking that I'm not getting it. So finally, he says, okay, how do you want to handle it? I said, what do you mean? He says, 300, just give me 50, I'll let you go. And subhanallah, you know what I said to him? I said, no, astaghfirullah. I said, I'm ustad in the jamia. Ustad means sheikh or a professor. I said, I'm ustad in the jamia. I said, I'm the professor and that's true, I was. Not a professor in that sense, of course but to them, a professor means anyone who teaches I was an adjunct professor for 3 semesters. So I said, no, I am ustad. And he knows I was dressed like this. He said, okay, go. He knows. Why? Because if he gave me a ticket for a law that I broke, and this is okay, even though it's not found in the Quran, but it's still part of the Sharia, this money will go to the state to help the state, the country, the Muslim. It goes to the Muslim treasury, right? But if I give it to him, does it benefit the state? It doesn't benefit the state. So I have committed injustice. He has committed injustice. The curse of Allah is upon the giver and the receiver of that bribe. But let's say I was pulled over unjustly. I was pulled over unjustly. Like, for example, in one country, one brother, he was saying that he got pulled over. And the police was trying to find a reason to give him a ticket. He checked his windshield, everything was okay, no cracks. He was wearing his seat belt. The front windows were not tinted. Everything was perfect. So he said, where's your fire extinguisher? Where's your fire extinguisher? Because in that country, it's the law to have a fire extinguisher in your car. Now, when you are in that position, because I was also pulled over, in the country without wearing a helmet. Maybe you could say that was justified, but there's not a single person in the whole country that wears a helmet. So anyway, if you are pulled over or something happens to you and you know that an injustice is going to be committed towards you, and the only way for that injustice to be removed is if you pay, then the scholar said it is permissible for you to go ahead and pay, because that will not fall under bribe. From a Sharia perspective, I'm talking about. From a legal perspective, I'm not a legal expert. It can or it cannot. Or, let's say I was in another country trying to make an identity card. Yeah? And they were putting all kinds of requirements that not even in their books. Wallahi, I was given the merry-go-round, literally the merry-go-round. Go to that person, I got a signature, that person came back to the first person. He said, the first person do this. What was supposed to literally take 15, 30 minutes was taking about 4, 5, 6 hours. And you need an ID in that country in order for you to do certain things. And they weren't doing it because they want money. So if you give something, if you give it, then you will not fall under this. Because it's your right and they are preventing it. What else to do? How else to go ahead? What is impermissible is when you are giving bribe in order to take away the rights of someone else. If you are giving a bribe in order to do injustice to someone else, this is what is haram, and this falls under this particular hadith. And second to last, Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, he actually compared bribery, when it comes to receiving a favorable judgment. You bribe the judge, he said this is an act of kufr. He said this is why? Because you are buying the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are buying the verses of Allah with money. You are selling the justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you to go ahead and seek. You are actually selling that for some money. And lastly, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, he gave us that there are going to be many, many trials. And in particular in this hadith, he says, I fear for you 6 trials. Foolish leaders. Imaratu sufaha. They're foolish. They will go ahead and do all kinds of stuff. Yeah? They're foolish in every meaning of the word. Shedding of blood. Bribery in judgments. My father-in-law, he was selling his land, which was a huge land full of pomegranates, and the only thing that was left, and this is about 6 years ago, 8 years ago, about 8 years ago, the only thing that was left was the stamp from the judge. And for that stamp, the judge wanted $30,000. Okay? Yeah. Back home. He wanted $30,000 just for one stamp to approve. Everything was done. There's no way that will go through. So he gave him $30,000. After a few months, that person was killed. The judge was killed. For whatever else, maybe he did something else to someone else and they killed him. That $30,000 plus all the $30,000 that he was taking from other people, how did that benefit him? I'm sure he had a few cases of 30,000, 100,000, whatever. How did that money benefit him? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said that I fear for you 6 trials, foolish leaders, shedding of blood, bribery in judgments, severing family ties, and those who take the Quran as music. Those who take the Quran as music, and an excessive amount of police, and this is an authentic hadith, who take the Quran as music. Maybe we will cover it inshallah one of these days. What does that hadith, this particular hadith means? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us the people of justice and the defenders of justice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never allow us to give bribes or put us in a position to take bribes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us the advocates of justice, the justice of the Sharia all over the world, and apply Sharia and justice in our lives and amongst those who are our constituents. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.